Foster Allen. Roger Kelty was my teacher and soccer coach and mentor, 1965, 6, 7, 8, and 9. A wonderful, wonderful person. Always be remembered.
And the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Man who was born of woman is of few days and full of trouble. He comes forth like a flower and fades away. He flees like a shadow and is no more. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this. Blessed are they who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, said the Spirit, that they may rest from their labor, and their works do follow them. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Amen. Let us stand for the responsive prayer. Eternal Father, strong to save, we approach you in your everlasting mercies on this solemn time of remembrance and reflection. Incline your mighty ears towards us this evening. Lord, bless this gathering of family and friends of your servant Roger, who has finished his earthly pilgrimage, laboring faithfully in this country. We give you thanks for the life and labor and times of your servant Roger, who has been faithful in this country and faithful to this country and its people, giving service, instruction, motivation, and encouragement. Receive his soul, O Lord, and may your angels escort him directly to Abraham's side, where he will receive the rewards for his service to his fellow man. May his joys never end as eternity rolls along, and he rests in your glorious presence. You are the God of all comfort, and we pray that you will minister to his survivors who are in Sorrow Valley at this time, especially son Keith, daughter Kyrene, and descendants. Lord, we pray the seeds that he has sown here in this land will continue to produce positive fruit among a grateful people. May the legacy of your servant Roger be indelibly carved in the annals of our history. Father, in your gracious keeping, leave we now your servant sleeping. May eternal rest be his on your mighty bosom forever and ever. Amen.
Good evening. Roger specifically requested to have this poem read. He loved it. And once you hear it, I'm sure you'll see why. The Future by Margaret Rorke. Most folks, well worth a memory, have statues still in stone. But teachers mold their monuments in living flesh and bone. The student who goes out in life and makes a famous name admits unto the heart of it some teacher shares the fame. I never heard a pianist with talent true and rare, but in the shadows I can see a teacher standing there. No skillful doctor ever saved the lives of humankind without the seeds some teacher stored within that fertile mind. All lawyers, dentists, engineers, all who are beloved by men, remember what some teacher taught and quote it now and then. No actor, writer, carpenter, no boxer you'll allow pursues a chosen field unless some teacher showed him how. Yes, teachers mold their monuments. They build them year by year, not like the ancient pyramids, so awesome and austere, which time and time will wear away, but spurning solemn stone. Our teachers mold eternally in living flesh and bone. And may Roger's legacy live on through the minds, the souls, the hearts, the living monuments that he molded with amazing skill, great care, and unconditional love. Rest in peace, dear Roger.
I'd like to say a few words on behalf of Roger's twin brother, Mitch. What can I say about Roger other than I have lost my other half? That statement is much truer than you might think, bearing in mind as identical twins, we were the product of one egg which subsequently split. So the bond was established when first we were, as Roger was wont to say, womb mates, that it endured for 84 years after. We were born in the idyllic surroundings of a tea estate in Java, a peaceful and happy environment which was shattered by the Second World War and the invasion of Java by the Japanese. The following 3 years saw Roger and I moving between first Australia, then South Africa, before finally reaching the safe haven of Aberdeen in northeast Scotland. During that time, there was no opportunity to meet and befriend other children of a like age, thus drawing us ever closer to each other for both amusement and comfort. Roger was always taller and more gifted in many ways, which led me to look up to Roger almost as a big brother, and he lived up to this role, being very protective and supportive towards me at all times. By his example, he provided me with confidence in my own abilities, and although our paths subsequently diverged, it was his early influence which set me on my path to a very happy and fulfilled life. Regardless of the circumstances, it was immensely comforting to know that he would always be there for me. A comfort I like to believe that he knew was fully reciprocated. Only with him could I share my closest secrets and innermost fears. Fate decreed that for a large part of our lives, many miles were to separate us, but throughout those years we always remained in close contact. Latterly, advances in technology gifted us with the ability to not only speak to each other on WhatsApp, but to actually establish concurrent visual contact. How I miss those Sunday evening chats, and God knows how much I miss you, my other half.
I gotta get ready. I've been trying to get ready since I was asked to do this. I'm probably gonna get dry mouth. I want to begin by saying thank you, Kyrene and Keith, for inviting me here to do this, be a part of this. I'm honored. It's probably, anyhow, I'm sure a lot of people are curious as to how Roger Kelty and Johnny Brown ended up being lifelong friends. Here it is. Yeah. Gum out. Tie on. Shirt tucked in. I'll explain. First met Mr. Kelty, or I got to know Mr. Kelty when I went into high school. I was 11 years old. I never had him as a teacher, so I really didn't know him. I knew who he was. I didn't really get to know him until he became deputy headmaster. And once he became deputy headmaster, we really got to know each other very, very well. I can't impress on you how much I was always in trouble in school, especially in my last few years, and consequently always in Mr. Kelty's office. I was in his office so much, I might as well have put a cot in there. I honestly, it was like it became my home room. It was just one of those things. So I was always eventually sent to Mr. Kelty, go see Kelty. That was the thing. And it was always for things like chewing gum, not wearing a tie, not tucking your shirt, put on your ties, spit out your gum. So it was always these things that I would have to get sent to Kelty for, and Mr. Kelty. And I would get in there and be ready to take my blows, and he'd give me this performance or behavior report card that you'd have to take and give to the teacher at the beginning of every class. And it was every class you did this, and so depending on your performance and how well you behaved, you were given a comment. And for me to go through an entire week without having a bad comment or a some blemish, it was very difficult. And on Fridays, at the end of the week, I'd have to go see Kelty. That's what we always say, go see Kelty, and hand in the report card. He was pretty forgiving if you had maybe one infraction, but if it was 2 or more, or depending on the severity, I would have to do it all over again. So invariably, I never got to do it just 1 week at a time. It would always be 2 weeks, so that it would be where I would finally be able to come off of probation. Anyhow, managed to get through school, finish high school without getting expelled, although I did get suspended a couple of times for silly stupidness, but finally finished school and I was like, right on, man, done, free at last. Sayonara, see you later, QC, rock and roll, here I come, man. And I really did that. I was so happy and just grateful. I don't know, I guess maybe 8 years later or thereabouts, I see Mr. Kelty, of all places, Waterloo. Waterloo, man. So I was in there carrying on, having a blast, having a great time, and there, sure enough, we catch each other's eye, and he made a beeline for me. And I'm like, oh no, man, here it is. He's about to give me remind me of how much trouble I was all the time, and in trouble all the time. So he comes over and he says, hello, Johnny, and I go, how you doing, Mr. Kelty? And he goes, no, please, call me Roger. So I said, all right, Mr. Kelty, Roger. He goes, and the first thing, and I remember this forever, the first thing he said to me, he goes, you know, Johnny, of all my years in Queens College, you were always my favorite student. And I was like, I think he probably could have heard my joy. I was like, come on, man. He had been drinking. He had been drinking, I'm sure. We all had. We'd all been drinking. So anyhow, so I said, what are you saying, man? I mean, I'm astounded. How could, I said, all those times in the classroom, I mean, the office, the many office visits, the reprimanding, the report cards of Friday afternoons, all those times of being in trouble all the time. He goes, yes, Johnny, I know you were always in trouble, but you were never malicious, and it was always just mischievous. You were always clowning around. And he says, in actuality, I always encouraged the faculty to, allow for students to think outside the box. The nonconformists, the black sheep. And he says, and you were all of that. So I was like, well, I appreciate it. He goes, and to tell you the truth, every time you left my class office, I was laughing inside. He goes, it was just a joy for me to be the one. He says, when you finally got to if you got to the point where you got sent to my office, I had to do my job. I was only doing what was expected of me. So that was the beginning of our friendship. He called me Johnny Brown, class clown. So we became really good friends after that and continued our friendship with phone calls and staying in touch, whenever we can. Excuse me. And during our friendship, we realized we shared a mutual friend, Dr. Patrick Balfe, he used to call him. He used to call him a lot of other things, but I can't repeat that right now, maybe later. So he was telling me about what he enjoyed most about Balfe was going spearfishing. And also, most importantly, they would go diving wrecks and getting antiquities, artifacts from these wrecks. This is one. This is an old piece of timber with a very rudimentary bronze spike through it from an old boat. This is hundreds of years old. I got this when Queens College had their 50th anniversary in 2019. And I was in touch with Roger, of course, and said, man, so looking forward to seeing you, at the reunion. He goes, no, Johnny, I won't be going. And I go, no, what do you mean? Why won't you go? And he goes, well, The truth is, I don't walk very well anymore. I don't walk long distances, and I especially am uncomfortable when I'm walking on unfamiliar ground, and especially at night. So I said to him, I'm nervous, I'm going to break it up. So I said to him, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come and collect you and drive you right to the front door. And he says, no, I wouldn't want you to do that. So I said, well, I'll arrange a car service and we'll all meet at my house. And that's what we did. We met at my house, and it was on this occasion that we all went to the reunion. He gave me this. From Balf to Roger to me. This treasure is now my most treasured treasure. I'm going to end with another little story. Won't keep it too long. Another expatriate that came here in the early 60s and made the Bahamas his home was Mr. Graham Cooper and his wife Maureen. I always admired and really respected expatriates that came here and made our beloved Bahama land their home, especially contributing members to our society like Roger and Balfi and Mr. Cooper were really upstanding citizens. So Mr. Cooper would have this Christmas party every year, a really amazing party, a Christmas wonderland of decorations like you would never imagine. The best I've ever seen. And I was Mr. Cooper's mechanic. In fact, from an early, first engine I ever put on a boat in 1975 was Mr. Cooper's boat. And it's the old James Bond boat named Thunderball. So years later, he started personally hand giving me an invitation to this Christmas party. So I went to the party and it was lovely, but I really felt out of place. I didn't know anybody. Everyone was considerably older than me, and it wasn't something I really, felt right being there. But year after year, he would bring me, hand deliver at the boatyard, this invitation. So, obligingly, I went, and then it's like, all right, I'm going to the party again, and I would spend my time and do politely attend, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't really enjoy it, right? Until in 2001, I went to a Christmas party. It was the first year I'd taken Mary with me. We had just recently started dating. And I look and I see my pal, Roger. So I was like, right on, man. Of course, beeline together. And we would just immediately hit it off, talking. And I made the introduction to Roger, saying, this is Mary. And she's a school. Once he learned that she was a school teacher, the very first thing he said to her was, there was never a student more talked about in Queens College staff room than Johnny Brown. Because a week did not pass without his name coming up. So that began the beginnings of many Christmas parties at the Coopers that we would both enjoy going to. Now I really enjoyed going because I was going to see my pal Roger. And sadly, we had several years of that, but sadly, Maureen passed, and then Mr. Cooper Graham. So we didn't have that opportunity anymore. And I didn't have the opportunity to see Mr. Kelty, Roger, that much. But we stayed in touch with the phone, and then when his voice went bad, we couldn't talk on the phone anymore, so I learned how to use a computer for true, and then emailing, and then he got his voice back, and we would resume talking again, and then finally I bought a cell phone, first one, in 2020, and I was able to stay in touch with my friend with WhatsApp and phone calls. So the last time I saw Mr. Kelty, Roger, was June of 21, last year. And we'd had plans to get together, see each other. Never could happen. I never really got to say goodbye. But the thing that's so amazing to me is that The teacher that I used to dread having to go see, the teacher that I dreaded seeing the most, became the person, the friend that I so looked forward to seeing the most. And now he's gone, and I'm really, really sad. I'm so sad. I'll never forget you. I'll never forget you, my friend. Mr. Kelty, Roger, my friend, my pal, my buddy.
Good afternoon, family and friends of the late Roger Kelty. It's hard to believe that I just said that, because we all expect our loved ones to live forever. I expected after the pandemic that I would resume seeing Roger at our weekly Rotary meetings. I expected to continue to hear his long-winded and hilariously funny jokes, to feel his overwhelming and overpowering personality and presence, and to enjoy his zest for life and his fun-loving spirit. Thank you, Keith and Kyrene, for allowing me to give this brief tribute to an exemplary Rotarian and also a personal friend, a mentor, and a confidant. I first met Mr. Roger Kelty when I joined the Ministry of Education in 2003. He was the director of the scholarship program at the Life of Key Foundation. As you know, both the Ministry of Education and the Life of Key Foundation shared an award called the Bahamas All Merit Scholarship. It was and continues to be the most prestigious award given to the most spectacular student that graduated from a Bahamian high school. Roger was all passionate about the award and just as passionate about the recipients. In fact, he followed the progress and success of all of the recipients throughout their educational and professional careers. During that time, Roger also served with me on the Ministry of Education Scholarship and Education Loan Committee. As a member of the board, Roger was a wealth of knowledge. He was a scholarship guru. He seemed to know everything that you had to know about scholarships. And what I really liked about Roger was the fact that he was passionate about students, all students. Not just those who were the brightest and the best, but also those who were average or with average grades, but showed enormous potential. He had the ability to spot that potential right away and advocated for them whenever he could. Being new to the vast world of scholarships, I knew that if I wanted to be anything in the industry or to gain the respect that Roger had, I had to learn everything that Roger knew. And so that's what I did. And that's how our wonderful relationship of friendship and mentorship began. Over the 15 years period that went after that, we worked closely to make dreams come true for thousands of Bahamian students across the length and breadth of the Bahamas. Our paths crossed again on a parallel street when I joined the Rotary Club of Southeast Nassau. At my first meeting, who should I see? None other than Mr. Roger Kelty. I was happy, and I immediately was at ease because I know that my mentor, Roger, would make sure that I was okay and nobody would harass me at the meeting. Past President Roger Kelty was an exemplary Rotarian who served the club since its inception. He was very proud of his perfect attendance record, and he participated in everything the club sponsored. I can safely say without contradiction that prior to the pandemic, Roger attended every stakeout, every movie night, every social, and back then we had a lot, every fundraiser, every community service project, no matter where it was, every dinner, every blood drive, and he gave blood, every Rotary meeting, and he was a member of every board for the last 30 years. Roger was the historian for the club, the ever-ready sergeant-at-arms, the joke teller, and the one that sat at the bar after the meetings with P. Anthony White socializing with anybody who would stay. When I became president of Rotary in 2011, past President Roger was my strongest supporter. He would constantly come to me and tell me what a great job I was doing. In fact, once he said that I was the best president the club had ever seen. I believe that to this day. Roger knew how to big you up. But I know that he didn't have to say these things, so he said it because he meant it. I don't know if he did it to anyone else, but Roger was never one who shied away from telling his feelings or telling how he felt about you. Over the years, I remember him telling me things like, Reg, man, you're doing a great job at scholarships. Keep it up. Or he'll say, Reg, you're going to do well. Or you're a class act. Just before he passed, he said to me in a text, he said, Reg, thank you for being my good buddy, for being a good buddy to me. I will always miss those encouraging words from Roger. Just how Roger felt about many of us is how the world felt about him. He made the Bahamas his home and became immersed in its people and its culture. Roger was extremely loved for his interest and relationship with people. He was cool and calming force with a jovial and fun-loving spirit. Roger always had a damn good joke in his mouth. His jokes were classic. And we all look forward to when Roger would be the sergeant-at-arms at meetings. He had us all rolling on the ground with uncontrollable laughter. He was a great storyteller. All his jokes made you feel that you were the main character. At several of our meetings, he did his presentation on the history of laughter. And Keith, if you ever find that document, I would love to have a copy of it, please. It's a classic.
We have it.
It's tough. As I spent the last evening or a couple of evenings since Roger passed, going through my WhatsApp messages from 2016 and pictures of Roger, they brought back many real good memories about the good times we shared personally and as Rotarians. He always kept me advised of what was going on in his life and his medical challenges. What his two favorite people in the world were doing, Keith and Kyrene. He always talked about you guys with much love and admiration. We are saddened by Roger's passing, but it is just how Roger would have wanted it. No announcement, no fanfare, just the lovely memories that he shared and that we will forever remember. And I'm sure Roger's having a good time with his parents and his family members and his lifelong friends, including P. Anthony and others. To end my tribute, I would like to recall a joke that Roger told at our Rotary meeting one time. So he gets to the podium and he says in his Scottish accent, fellow Rotarians and guests, give me a letter that begins with M and ends with M and stands for constipation. So we all waiting to hear. Rest in peace, my friend. Rest in peace, Rob.
I'd like to extend my extreme joy and gratitude to the Kelty family, especially Keith and Kyrene, for allowing me the privilege to honor my beloved teacher and mentor. It is indeed a blessing to me. That being said, Johnny Brown just hurt my feelings. I was led to believe that I was Mr. Kelty's favorite student. Anyhow, that doesn't change how I felt about this man. Amen.
Did you go to QC?
I spent more time in his office than you did. Okay, I just want to talk briefly on I'm going to use the title, He Gave Me Wings. All throughout Scripture we find countless examples of God's intervention in the affairs of mankind. More often than not, it occurs by the means of process. Now, who could have known that the Japanese invasion of Java in East Indonesia in 1942 would set in motion some dynamics that would, over the next several decades, serve as a catalyst for Mr. Roger Kelty to be my teacher. So the Japanese had a lot to do with Mr. Kelty meeting me. We're gathered here to memorialize my teacher, my mentor, my friend, and who has made and left indelible impressions on my own life. We could only be described as polar opposites. Roger Kelty's journey would take him from Java in the Dutch East Indies to South Africa, Australia, Scotland, England, before landing here in Nassau to be my teacher. By his own admission, his first choice of destination was Africa. He wanted to go to Uganda. However, Proverbs 19 and 21 reminds us that many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand.
Yes.
The purpose of God for young Roger Kelty did not include Kampala. Didn't include Kampala at all. Instead, Nassau in the Bahamas is where he was destined to meet up with a tall, painfully shy, lanky, underweight, insecure, and dirt-poor teenager who was bullied mercilessly because he didn't have nice clothes, and he spoke with a raw Andros Island accent. I began attending Queen's College not long after the inclusion of black students in his classrooms. However, not everyone was thrilled that those of my hue were enrolled. A number of the white teachers took a delight in reducing some of us to tears by means of deliberate embarrassment. Despite the financial lack in my formative years, my father made certain to instill in me a love of reading and books. The library of Queen's College provided a solace for me from the bullies, and of course, I didn't want anyone to know that I couldn't afford lunch. It was in this cocoon that my writing skills developed. They first came to notice of Mr. Stephen Wrigley, who was my then literature teacher. It was he who suggested that I go to see Mr. Kelty concerning my writing. I vividly recall our first meeting. Filled with timid uncertainty, I hesitantly rapped on the office door where my future mentor was. He was busy poring over reams of paperwork on his desk, and he smiled at me as I stood in the doorway until he indicated a chair to me. Not knowing what to expect from this complete stranger, but there was something about the way his eyes twinkled that made me feel at ease. I handed him a few pieces of fledgling work as he asked me my name, which he pronounced in a rather quizzical way. The lilt of the burr in his tongue and the deeply entrenched Scottish brogue combined to produce a curious way of speaking. R's became D's, and he called me Harris. This routine would change my life for sure. I was constantly writing and could not wait for another opportunity to show him my creative work. Gladly, his door was always open to me. This is where our decades-long friendship began. My work was carefully critiqued, and he would lovingly offer his constructive criticism, always giving me hints and ideas on how to improve my expressions. Under his private tutelage, I learned how to develop a storyline, build up anticipation, use pathos and humor, as well as to identify protagonists and antagonists, setting a stage, creation of character, dialogue, and countless other vagaries of the craft. My 2 years of A-level studies was an absolute joy. Literature was my third subject, and yes, Roger Kelty was my teacher. Roger was a rather unassuming man. Didn't have a loud voice, but he commanded the classroom. He had a curious way of walking, which seemed as though one of his legs was a tad shorter than the other. I'm still willing to bet that nobody, and I mean nobody, could clear their throat like Roger Kelty did. Even though we were studying literature under him, some of the time we veered off topic and he assumed the role of storyteller, a loving father figure. Fatherly advice he gave us, he shared logic, wisdom principle, life lessons, were all interspersed with Chaucer, Byron, Keats, Longfellow, Thoreau, Platt, Hemingway, and many, many more. Mr. Kelty was a sporting enthusiast who excelled in several disciplines. He coached a winning soccer team for a while at QC. However, he was a pugilist at heart. Indeed, Roger was exceptionally skilled as a boxer. Now, just how good he was became evident when he grudgingly accepted a fight challenge from a much younger, much bigger opponent in the person of a brass-talking young man, Andrew Drew Aldrich. Now, for 3 rounds in a makeshift boxing ring, it was evident that Roger was pulling his punches. Thank God he did. He was pulling his punches, but yet he managed to still outclass and beat the snot Drew Aldrich.
Well, there's revisionist history now.
Mr. Kelty was more than a teacher to me. He was a mentor. He was an advisor. He was a sounding board, an arbitrator. He was a voice of reason. And yes, he was a friend. He had a keen sense of humor, and he relished making us laugh and think at the same time. I look forward to his use of puns. One of his most favorite puns was, "Two maggots fought in their earnest." I'll let it settle on a bit. Two maggots fought in their earnest. After school and in my adult life, I maintained contact with him and kept him abreast of all the milestones in my life, including my jobs, my marriage, birth of my children, and yes, my subsequent divorce. With the launch of my first book, I presented my former teacher with an autographed copy and also an engraved plaque of gratitude for the way that he influenced my life and my writing. Over the years, we mainly corresponded via telephone and email. When I was installed as pastor of my church 7 years ago, I insisted, and Mr. Kelty was present. And he was there beaming with obvious pride. He would confirm as much in his remarks during the service. Before he left that afternoon, he thanked me for including him in my life long after the last school bell rang. My last conversation with him was just several weeks prior to his transition. His memory was still sharp, but his body much weaker, as he confided that the lack of mobility and the failing eyesight was a challenge for him. It was King David in Psalm 55:6 who he wrote, wishing that he had the wings of a dove so that he could fly away and be at rest. In that vein, it was Mr. Roger Kelty who gave me wings and allowed me to fly so high that I could overcome many obstacles in my life. I overcame insecurity. I overcame fear of the unknown, self-hatred, and also a myopic view of the world. He taught me that life is a process, and some phases of it will be unpleasant and often painful. Disappointments, he told me, are simply preparations for success. And failure are merely reminders to try harder. Over the 50+ years of knowing Mr. Kelty, I realized that he was actually colorblind. He was actually colorblind because he regarded all students, black, white, and Asian, all the same way, with respect. Mr. Kelty has made a mark on the educational system in this country, which is now carved in stone. To Keith, Kyrene, and the entire extended family, thank you for lending Roger to us in order to place his footsteps in the sands of so many of the lives in this country. I leave you with these lines from the poem, The Father That I Knew, which was in my first book, Unseen Things. And it reads, the hand that led his humble life would write the final page. The heart that held such love for me bowed to advancing age. The many years he spent with us somehow just simply flew. Such are the memories of the man, the teacher that I knew. Sail well, flying swan, sail well. May his soul rest in peace.
Good evening, everyone. First, I must say, Keith and Karen, what an honor it is for me to stand here this evening to talk about Roger. I mean, there are so many people greater than I who could have stood here and did this evening. So I am eternally grateful to have this opportunity. That's my first order of business. My second order of business is to correct Reg Saunders, who obviously was misled into thinking he was the greatest president in the club. And Roger clearly told me it was me. So that's why you came after me. Yeah, I came after you, but he told me that last year. So anyway. And then the one other piece of business I have to clarify, the speaker before Mr. Harris. I had lunch today. I just coincidentally was having lunch with a former student of Rogers. And I mentioned that they were having this evening and I was going to speak. He said, oh, maybe you could tell them about that story when he beat the snot out of Drew Orban. He said, and the most amazing thing about this, he said, in most schools, if a teacher ever got in a fight with a student, every student would be pulling for the other student. He said, but everybody was pulling for Mr. Kelty. He said, it was a great day for us that day. But I had not long joined Rotary Club of Southeast Nassau when I was informed that I needed to do the duty of sergeant. Everyone had to do it when they came in. We had a red badge, red sticker on our badge saying new member. If you wanted that off, you had this list of things, and sergeant was one of them. In our club, that was intimidating. When I went in the club, we had people like Roger, and there was another guy, Ralph Barnett. And if you've ever heard Roger and Ralph tell jokes, you know, we just used to have meetings where we just get, because Val Mora joined later. So we'd have meetings where we just get the best joke tellers in the club to come up and tell jokes. And it would just be an hour long of nearly wet your pants laughing. Okay, so, but I have to get up now and do this, and it's intimidating. But couldn't avoid it. So much like a young man who's making love for the first time, it seemed to be over in a flash, and I really wasn't sure if the audience was satisfied. As I walked around the room with the collection plate, I eventually came to the table with Roger and P. Anthony and the rest of those guys. Roger dropped his fine into the bucket, looked me in the eye, and gave me a hearty, "Well done, Tim." Now, I probably didn't do that well, but having the master comedian Roger commend me with that way boosted my confidence to get up and tell jokes again in the future. But that was Roger. He was always encouraging people. His encouragement continued when I became president, always boosted my confidence with his kind word. I like to think that I'm a progressive thinker, I like to move things along. But when it comes to Rotary, I realized there were people who don't want to move so fast. Sadly, I've become one of those people now. But Roger really appreciated that I paid homage to the past and didn't move things along. And he and some of the old guys, P. Anthony and those guys, really appreciated that. But beyond that, he did not resist the youth movement in the club. In fact, he stood to the side, he let the young people take over, and he encouraged you. He kept you going, and he made sure that you knew you had his full support. So as I said, they stepped aside, they allowed us to lead. From their seats on the sideline, they became your cheerleaders. For years after I'd been president, he continued to congratulate me for my presidency, and yes, tell me I had the best year ever. And when I became the assistant governor, the response from Roger was pure enthusiasm. "Well done, man," he said. And he boosted my confidence again by saying, "I knew you could do all of this. I knew you were a great Rotarian." As everyone has said, Roger's wit and sense of humor were legendary. The members of Rotary Club of Southeast Nassau consider ourselves fortunate to have been able to experience this comedy masterclass on a regular basis. And it could all be so impromptu. Whenever someone was sergeant and didn't have the confidence to tell a joke or didn't have one to tell, they would call on Roger or Ralph, the resident comics. And they always had side-splitting, eye-watering jokes to tell. One of his jokes I always loved that Roger told was of a man who loved eating beans. And of course, these beans induce massive flatulence. He'd go to bed each night and he'd blow his horn all night long and wake up the next morning and continue blowing the tuba. His wife said to him, "One of these days, you're going to blow your guts out." He was not having any of it. He figured beans was his indulgence, and he loved it. So one morning, she's downstairs in the kitchen preparing dinner, and she hears him crank up his horns. And they're loud, and they're high, and they're low, and he's blowing. And she's annoyed, and she's in the kitchen fixing the chicken, and she gets an idea. So she sneaks upstairs with the chicken guts, pulls down his underwear, and puts the chicken guts into his underwear. She goes back downstairs and waits for it. Sooner or later, there's another loud horn blowing upstairs, followed by a blood-curdling scream, and then feet run into the bathroom. She waited a couple minutes, and she ran upstairs, and she says, "Darling, what's wrong?" He says, "Well, you know how you told me that if I didn't stop the farting that I'm going to blow my guts out?" She said, "Yes." He says, "Well, today's the day. But by the grace of God and the smooth handle of this toothbrush, I've managed to push them all back in." But that was the kind of stuff that Roger would have us on the floor laughing about. You know? But as we mature in Rotary, a lot of us start to fall off in attendance in the club. We don't go out to the things that we used to, even if we go to meetings. But Red said it even better than I can. Roger had 42 years of perfect attendance. Nowadays, you can fall out of bed in Rotary and get perfect attendance, right? So some clubs give you a month before, a month after to get your perfect attendance. In Roger's day, for a lot of it was 7 days before, 7 days after. And to achieve perfect attendance under those type of circumstances was nothing short of phenomenal. But Roger did it for 42 years. And he was there at every single event, as Red said. Whether it was blood given, whether it was breakfast down at the AIDS camp, no matter what it was, Roger was there and he showed up. In fact, after he became incapacitated, every single event we had until he passed away, no longer than the Christmas just before he passed away, we were ringing the bell at the mall. And Roger called and said, I can't make it. I said, Raj, you gave us 42 years, 42 perfect years, bro. You don't need to worry about this. Let the young people carry the torch for this. But that was Roger. He was like totally committed to the cause, and he felt bad if he wasn't there. He was totally selfless to the end. I went to see Roger a few times after he was confined to home, and though in a wheelchair and in excruciating pain, he always managed to smile through it. We shared a joke or two before I left. After the last time I visited Roger in December, someone said that he wasn't really doing well. Well, from what I had seen of Roger when I was there, I didn't believe this, and I totally contradicted him. I said, I'm confident Roger will pull through this, and we will see him in the club telling his jokes. And we were planning to have a 2-hour video comedy special with Roger Kelty. But sadly, New Year's Eve, I think it was, Phil Cumming sent me the note with the sad news. I found it difficult to believe, and I still find it difficult to believe that Roger is not here. The impact that Roger has had on this country is immeasurable in my mind. When you consider the number of students in his charge as a teacher and later director of scholarships at Life at Key, you understand that though not born a Bahamian, he had and continues to have a seriously integral part on the development of our country. I was having lunch today with a former student, as I said, who told the great times he had with Mr. Kelty. He was the one that told me the Drew Aubrey joke. He also said how he was in Form 13, and Lindsay might have been in that class actually. And they were in the rec room, and they were making a serious amount of noise. And Mr. Kelty appeared at the door, and he didn't say a word, but he was so well respected, and the room felt silent. And he said, I have to tell you a story. He said, this morning I'm coming down Burnett Road, and there's a construction crew with jackhammers digging up Burnett Road. He said, and I feel sorry for those men. I feel really sorry. And so they're all looking at him like, why do you feel sorry? He says, because of your noise, they can't hear the jackhammers. So it's like all facets of his life. He just went through making people happy. Even with my own kids, I saw this advice on the best way to evaluate schools and where to send them. And he pointed out to me, and I saw this in Kyrene's tribute to him, and as Red said, he said that I should consider a school that developed the whole child. Not just look at academics, not just look at athletics, not just look at the social life, but make sure that the school produced good, productive citizens. There are legends in life that we sometimes count ourselves lucky to have known. In my life, Roger Kelty is certainly one of those legends. Whether it was being a teacher or a Rotarian, he lived a life in service to others. And really, what nobler cause could there be? I end with a quote from one of Roger's favorite poets, if not the favorite, Robbie Burns. If there's another world, he lives in bliss. If there is none, he made the best of this. Rest in peace, my friend.
My fellow colleague, George Smith, told me KISS because I'm the last one on the program. And whispered to me that keep it short, stupid, so. Kyrene and Keith, this is our second tribute to your father. As I think Kyrene was traveling to Atlanta, and Keith couldn't get permission from his wife to get out of the house. So it's, we're happy that we can have you all here today for this special tribute to our good friend and mentor and so many other things that Roger was to all of us. Skull Club, just for those of you who are not aware of it, is a worldwide club of 17,000 plus. Is that right, Ron?
Yeah, that pretty close.
Oh, yeah, pretty close. Yeah, and it's comprised of tourism professionals from every country in the world. You got that, Mr. Sanders? Thank you. And so I took Roger about 18, maybe 19 years ago as a guest of mine to lunch, and he never left. You know? Roger became an integral part of our club. We miss him dearly, and we've had great fun with him. But as you've heard today, you probably cannot describe Roger any dispassionate way, not at all. Inevitably, such reflection would be tinged with a lot of emotion. He had so many fine qualities. It's a challenge to highlight any particular one, but to those of us in the Skull Club of the Bahamas, he was the shining light or bright star each month for the past 17 years. Now, I notice Roger, as an artist, also from the speeches I've heard today, had little tinges, little snippets of his life put together. I also have some of those. I first met Roger, notwithstanding my youthful look, some 40 years ago. We were both frequent visitors to, at that time, a number of Nassau's favorite downtown bistros after work, such as the Green Shutters, Marlborough Arms, Town Hotel, Billabong, and Smuggler's Pub. We did the entire. I had a few more I remembered, you know. So, but Roger and a fellow Scot, God Davies, some of you might recall, became close friends, and his friendship with another close friend of mine, and also of Roger's, and also a member of the Rotary Club, P. Anthony White. We all got together at 5 o'clock every afternoon after work. And we joined a partnership, P. Anthony White and also God Davis, in starting a marketing company many years ago, and Roger suggested that I join them subsequently. But prior to that, we all used to hang out every day. I think I forgot one club. It's now called Latitudes. There was another bistro that. Yeah. Yes, that's right. So we. So what happened with that particular discussion? P. Anthony White had a degree in English literature, and Roger was very adept and adroit in English language and literature. So, and this was 1972, 73 about, and you know, we used to not talk any politics, and so we started discussing literature. And it was like going to the theater every afternoon, you know, and Roger with his sonnets and the old bard and quoting Irish poets and other stuff, and I'm sitting back just totally amused at this, and also having a drink or two in between. So it was quite a nice thing. But heavy was our burden at that time, but I sat as a wide-eyed student having my favorite beverage at this theater of brilliance behind these wonderful guys. Now, occasionally, the story as it goes, a number of persons used to come up to me and start whispering stuff in my ear during this, and Roger said to me, "What's up with that? What's up with that?" And I said, "Well, what's happening, they're looking for a scholarship, and I'm now working along with a guy who runs that scholarship called the Life of Key Foundation." and says, could you put a word in for me? You could put a word in for me. I said, it's getting bloody annoying. So Roger says, well, one way to solve this problem, why don't you talk to Dr. Kava Battle? I think it wasn't called College of the Bahamas then, and maybe she could solve this issue. She did. Thanks to Roger, I didn't have that stress anymore, you know. But the world has a way of going around, and everything goes around in a circle. Roger called me about 12 years after that, and he says, you know that little organization which was going to do the scholarship? I'm now the executive director of that. And I said, what? You know? So Roger, what he did for us and his commitment to education, I mean, he was such a loyal person. One time I was having a procedure in the hospital. The first person to call me was Roger. You know, my wife got a little upset with me at that time, but you know, and what's going on here. But anyway, he was always the guy who would rise to the occasion, and he's always there for you, you know. He's source of humor and such wonderful humor. He had a great capacity for delivery. Such was it that few members then or since had the temerity to provide light relief for our monthly meetings at which we gathered to discuss and address the weighty issues of the world today. Keith and Kyrie, you've both been at those meetings, so you know what I mean. Roger was erudite, yet unpretentious, disarmingly soft-spoken, yet blessed with a rapier-like wit, which was never used as a weapon, but as a salve to soothe wounds. He was an adopted son of the Bahamas, who flew the flag of his Scottish heritage with pride. He threw himself into life here and went at it full tilt. These traits made him an outstanding teacher, earning him the affection of generations of students, many of them who you see here today. All who knew him will miss his wit, his command of language, his gift for conversation, and his value as a friend. For us in the Scout Club, we miss our brother, and like Johnny, on my 60th birthday, Roger gave me this little fast, and he says, when everything fails you in life, my brother, you know, particularly those body parts, have a sip. And to Roger.
Hello, everyone. Just a couple moments. I'd just like to express, you know, how privileged I feel in my short time as compared to everyone else here to, you know, have the opportunity to be alongside and meet and spend time with such an amazing man. Roger immediately welcomed me into the family with open arms. And, you know, without hesitation, you know, blessed me with his only daughter's hand. I miss him immensely, and just wish he was still here. On behalf of the entire Kelty family, all the way in Scotland as well, we'd like to thank everyone for their overwhelming support. Please join us for some libations on the Cycad lawn, and let's continue celebrating the life of the one and only Roger Fyfe Kelty.
So everyone, I know the program has a song that's going to be sung by David Graham. He would prefer for us to join him along with his band, and we will have the song. It'll be the first song sung over there. So we're going to close the ceremony here, and let's go have some toasts and some laughs. Have a good time.
taking every wrong direction on that lonely way back home. Taking every wrong direction on that lonely way back home. Taking every wrong direction on that lonely